Hello, and welcome to November's segment of Broadband Bites for Lunch. I am so excited to have you all here today. I am going to give just a couple of minutes for those who are coming in, joining us a couple of minutes behind. And as always, this is being recorded, and you can find this recording and our previous recordings of Broadband Bites for Lunch on our YouTube channel. So thank you all for being here today. I am excited to talk to you about my most recent report that we have published that we'll be getting into shortly. I wanted to go ahead and add in our chat here a copy of my report in case you have not been able to get a chance to read that. That is dropped in the report for you. Okay. And without any further ado, we're going to get started. So thank you all for being here today. It is the end of November, and since we will be taking a break from Broadband Bites for Lunch in December, this is our last Broadband Bites for Lunch for the year of 2023. So thank you so much for being here with us today. If you were not here with us last month, we focused on Indigenous Peoples Day. We had a great guest speaker from H. Trussell from the Federal Reserve Bank of Minneapolis. They are a senior policy analyst talking about all the work that they're doing to support Native American communities and getting connected to the internet and with device access. We are so thankful to have them here. Again, if you were not able to view last month, I really encourage you to go over to our YouTube channel and check out our last session and our previous sessions throughout the year. Today, we're going to be focusing on our latest release from Next Century Cities, which is the high cost of connectivity has a disparate impact on public school students. This is a report that I wrote. I'm Stacey Baxter, Program Manager for Next Century Cities, and we're going to deep dive into this report today, ending with some local recommendations for local officials, and then we're going to touch briefly on some federal and state highlights, as we always do, and then ending today's session looking ahead at NCC for 2024. So again, thank you for being here, and we're going to jump right into our report, the high costs of connectivity. That was included in the chat. For those of you who were not in the first couple of minutes, I'm going to just throw that in the chat again if you haven't had a chance to review that. So about me a little bit and to why I am writing about public school students. So my background is I am a licensed master social worker. So I like to say that I have worked in and around the school system for my entire career. I've worked as a before and after school counselor, a therapeutic mentor, a school social worker, and just recently I spent the last 2 school years as a school therapist at a Title I school in Prince George's County, Maryland. And if you're not familiar with that terminology, a Title I school just means that the majority of the students at that school and the families that attend that school do fall below the poverty line. So when I was at that school and working as a school therapist, I really enjoyed working with all my students and families, but it was obvious to me that there were some issues around technology in the school systems. I'm going to talk a little bit more about what those issues are. But essentially, I was seeing students without access to internet at home, and they were not able to maintain their devices because of the high costs of them. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. But there were a lot of negative impacts that for students and families because of that. So I saw some educational disadvantages. There were definitely disciplinary issues when it comes to students who were not able to have their device at school or to access the internet at home. And then really, we're going to spend some time focusing on the financial strain on families for the high cost of connectivity and the high cost of technology that is embedded within the public school system of today. So that's a little bit about me, why I care about this, some of the things that I was seeing, and where I think some recommendations for local officials can help us to kind of close some of these gaps that are in the schools right now. So again, today we're going to focus on the school system's reliance on technology for almost every part of the educational experience, the high costs of technology that are negatively affecting a student's ability to achieve academic success, and then we're going to close it out with some recommendations for local officials and for some school districts. So when we look at public school systems, again, this is public schools, so this is not a choice from families. They're sending their children to the local school in their area. We are seeing that 90% of schools are on that one-to-one basis for technology. And what that means is that every student that enrolls in the school is given a electronic device, most of the time a Chromebook or a laptop, a MacBook, or an iPad even for students who attend that school. So it is assigned to them. They are not requesting it. This is just a part of how the school systems are working these days. When we look at some of the data, students are spending 1 to 4 hours or more, in my experience that I've seen, during the school day, each day online. So they are spending a majority of their time on one-on-one devices, doing some, and we'll talk about how that some of the technology is doing great things for students. We're getting personalized education. Students are able to work at their own paces. And so they're spending a lot of time on these technology pieces, on those educational tools inside the school system. When we look at after school, 70% of their homework requires the internet, and I'm sure that number just continues to increase. When we're looking outside of just students, so I don't know how many of you that are attending today have children in the public school system, but there's a lot of communication that goes back and forth between parents and students and teachers and administrators. And most of those communication platforms are through digital platforms today. So student portals, parent portals, closings for schools, disciplinary actions, attendance, all those things are going to happen on electronic devices or through the internet. Obviously, COVID-19 pushed the in-person school to home, but now students in today's classrooms, when there is inclement weather, I know the DMV area, which is where I'm located, is set to get a lot of snow this year. We're moving away from school snow days, right? So now we're going to be looking at having those children do online learning at home when they're not able to get to school because of inclement weather or school closings or any of those things. So we're not out of the woods when it comes to digital classrooms and Zoom classrooms. We're actually moving back into that realm when we look at some of the weather coming in this season. But also when we talk about educational tools. So I don't know, again, how many of you have students in the school district, but Dreambox and iReady and all of these different educational tools that students are using every day to complete necessary classwork, necessary homework, to complete tests outside of school, or even to study for those tests. All of those educational tools are happening on their computers, on their laptops, not on a paper and a pencil. So it's important to kind of frame us a little bit and to understand that students are a part of this process. They go to these schools, and this is what the school systems have designed for learning, and technology is a huge piece of that. We also see that this has had positive effects for students, right? So when we look at their increased access to the internet and being able to be using these educational tools that are designed for them to work at their speed, it's individualized for them. We see increased graduation rates, increased rates in scores in reading and writing, job readiness, increased classroom engagement. Students are more engaged when they are looking at an interactive program on their computer that's right in front of them versus having to pay attention to the teacher at the front of the board, right? So we're looking at the environment has changed for students in the public school system, but there are some great things coming out of that. We're seeing increased writing, increased scores in writing and reading, and accommodating for different learning styles. These are all great things that are happening when we have students involved in technology in the school system. But what I really want to focus on today is kind of this imbalance, right? This is great news for students that have home internet and device access, who have a lot of digital skills, who have parents that have digital skills. This is all great news for them. But what about the families and the students who are struggling with internet access, with device access, with digital skills? What does this mean for them that they are now a part of this educational system that's moving in a direction of technology, and they are being left behind? So this is really what I'm focusing on in my report. We've talked a lot about the digital divide. And for those of you who are really familiar in this area, the homework gap is really that second tier of it. And it was brought on through research through COVID-19. We're seeing that with COVID-19, 50 million public school students were expected to learn almost overnight from home. So that includes having device access, having internet access, having parents or older siblings that have digital skills to get you onto this Zoom platform, right? So we're talking a lot of different pieces here. And when we have students caught in that homework gap is turning into a learning gap. So we're leaving students behind academically. We're hurting them in their chances for academic success when they don't have access to the internet at home, and they don't have these devices, and they don't have individuals in their homes that can help them with those digital skills. And as I'll talk about, and Pew has done a lot of research on the effects of this, rural communities, low-income areas, and historically marginalized groups do face more prominent disadvantages when we're talking about this homework gap. So when we look at some of these disadvantages, we see that across like three main areas I just touched on: rural communities, low-income communities, and marginalized communities. So in rural communities, we're seeing 37% of students reporting not having home internet, right? So when we talk about all of the homework they have to do at home, all of the communication that goes back and forth with their teacher and with their administrators, if they don't have if they don't have the internet at home, how is that playing into their students' academic success, the family's connection with the school? This number is a lot different when we look at suburban areas, where only 25% lacked home internet, or in urban areas where only 21 lacked home internet. So we're still seeing a gap here, but that gap is a lot wider when we're talking about individuals in rural communities and not having access to the internet at home. When we talk about income status, I know I touched on the school that I worked at was a Title I school, majority of the students falling below the poverty line. 43% of households earning below $30,000 a year reported not having home internet. And along those same group of people who fall under the $30,000 a year in home earnings, 41% lacked a home computer or laptop, right? So we're seeing that not only does it affect infrastructure issues in rural communities, but we're seeing low-income communities being affected with the ability to maybe not be able to pay those high costs of internet. Look at ethnic and racial lines. We see that compared to white households, which only 18% lacked home internet, you're seeing these numbers go up exponentially when you're talking about Latino and Hispanic households, Black and African American households at 30% lacking home internet, and Native American households where that number jumps to 35%. So we are seeing, for those of you who are working in state broadband plans and your BEAD planning, a part of this BEAD planning is your digital equity plans. The Digital Equity Act of 2021 talked about 8 covered protected populations that need to be focused on when we're talking about where money goes, where infrastructure is building. These protected populations overlap with what we're seeing in the data of unfortunately, with public school students and their lack of internet at home, their lack of devices at home, and how it's affecting their educational success. So this is really the bread and butter. This is really the meat of my sandwich of what we're talking about in my report. We've talked about, the fact that schools rely on the internet, that they're using it more and more, the effects of students who don't have home internet. But this is actually talking about educational technology policies in schools. Like I said, 90% of schools are one-on-one schools, meaning each student receives an electronic device when they are enrolled. This is not an option. They are required to have an electronic device. When we're looking at accidents that happen, right? So these students have to bring their laptops and their Chromebooks, everything with them to school and to home every single day. You're talking about bus rides. You're talking about walking. You're talking about young kids, right? And in grade school, we have pre-K students, 4 and 5 years old, getting these Chromebooks, up to 12th grade students, 18, 17 years old, who we know that accidents happen, that sometimes school isn't their most important thing on their minds. And when we're looking at what happens when these electronic devices that were assigned to students, when they break or when they have screens that are broken or where they need to be replaced completely, we're talking hundreds of dollars for families. And this is just for one student. So what about a family who has 3 or 4 students that are attending public school? They are all going to get their own electronic device. And if that battery breaks on their iPad, that's $50. And this example that I'm giving is from Arlington County Public Schools in Virginia. It is a local area, and I'm picking on them just a little bit because they did have their policies written out online and able for me to see. But this is what we're seeing across the nation, across different school districts, not just on the East Coast, but across the nation, when we're asking families to pay these high costs for a keyboard that's broken, or a headphone jack that's broken, or completely replacing a device almost up to $300. I know personally, my brother was not the most responsible person. He probably would have had multiple breaks throughout his time from grade school up to high school. So, completely replacing a MacBook Air that is, again, given to a student. This is not a request. They are assigned this computer. If it breaks, is their family able to pay almost $700 to completely replace that device? Are they able to pay a $260 screen replacement when it cracks, right? And for the students that in the schools that I was in, that was not an option. Parents were not able to write a check or to send in a money order for over $200, no matter what the cost was or what the problem was, if it was an accident or if it was negligence. Either way, that's what happened after that, is a student did not have access to a device. So just to give you a little bit of a picture, this student would maybe be in a classroom where everybody else is working on their device. And if there's a desktop computer in the classroom, great, the student can use that. But what if someone else is using that? What if that is broken? I know in the school that I was in that not every classroom had a desktop computer that worked, or there may have been 3 or 4 students trying to share that one desktop computer because they all had broken laptops and broken computers that their families were not able to pay. These are costs that are outlined by the county, and in their policy, it did say, in accordance with Arlington public school policy, schools may adjust reimbursement in alignment with a family's ability to pay. However, the important word we have here is may. This is not a requirement. They do not have to meet a student or meet a child where they're at, or a family where they're at when it comes to financial feasibility and paying for these devices. This is just saying, hey, these are the costs that it costs the school. And so this is what it costs our families. And we might be able to reimburse in alignment with the family's ability to pay, but that we know that doesn't always happen. The other issue is that in Arlington County Public Schools, this is a standardized cost, but in Montgomery County Public Schools and other schools around here, they don't have standardized costs. A school can set the cost for a replacement of a device. So again, we're seeing this unequal and uneven balance that's having detrimental effects on our students in public schools. And when we take a look at what it looks like in a classroom, this student is sitting at their desk with nothing in front of them. Because when you have a curriculum or you have school educational tools being used online, and a teacher is assuming that everyone is going to have that device, that their schedule for the day is based on that information, when a student doesn't have a laptop, a device, a digital device, then you're asking a teacher to come up with a brand new set of tools for the day, or a brand new set of worksheets for the day, which is putting extra strain on our teachers. Then you're asking for different learning styles to be accommodated on a paper and pencil and not on a computer that has the algorithm to do that. You're seeing a learning loss for students. They're sitting at their desks, and when they're sitting at their desks with nothing to do, they tend to have behavioral issues. Those increased behavioral issues I was seeing every single day of students who were trying to find something to do with their time because they didn't have a Chromebook in front of them. The teacher was trying to come up with some extra worksheets for them to do, but in the meantime, they were getting themselves busy by getting in trouble, right? So the other effects you're having is what this student feels as relation to other students around them. If their family can't pay for a broken laptop and the student next to them is working diligently on their Chromebook and getting better test scores than they are, how does this affect their mental health, their self-worth, where they feel like they fit in a public school system, in the school system, right? So we're looking at a lot of detrimental and negative effects that happens when students and families are expected to pay these high prices, when they don't have the ability to pay them, they don't have the internet access at home. And so students are the ones that are falling behind. And I just don't think that that's fair. And so my recommendations here for local officials are really wanted to try to keep it simple. I could have many more that I think would really help some of our students, but I think by and large, it's important that local officials support legislation outlining the internet as an essential service. We know that students are having to use the internet at home for homework, for studying, for sometimes completing assessments. parents are having to communicate with teachers and administrators through online portals. So we're forcing this public school system to work online. So we need to make sure that it's a necessity that individuals and families have access to the internet at home, if that's what the public school system is requiring of them. Also, we're asking to champion federal programs. The Affordable Connectivity Program provides $30 a month in home internet and a one-time $100 device voucher. So that's important. Right now, there are over 20 million families signed up for the ACP. There could be more, right? And so we're trying to continue the funding in the federal government and trying to get people to join in on that. But it's important that our local officials really champion these programs, that our school districts are making them available for their families and letting them know that there's support here. And I think the third and what is one of the most important ones for me is that we create standardized district-wide or even nationwide technology policies that include low-income options. So it's not enough to say that we might help reimburse in alignment with the family's income. We need to have a plan that says if a student or a family falls below this number in income or this part of the poverty line, what are the charges that families have to pay back? Because I know that a $700 replacement is not going to work for most families. And having middle income options, right? So we have a tier. So it would be nice if we could have a tiered, standardized policy that includes the ability for some students and families or the inability to not pay. So that's kind of outlining my report. Again, I did put the report in the chat. I hope that you are able to take a read and use some of this information, this data, to talk back with your local officials, to talk with your school districts. If you're on the PTO or the PTA of a school that your children are at, bring these issues up. Ask if they are advertising for the Affordable Connectivity Program. Ask about what their technology policies are. Some schools don't even have them outlined. And so it's really hard for parents to understand what they need to pay and what they need to be prepared for. So I really encourage you to take this information, take this data, spread it as far as you can, and really talk about some of the issues that we're having here when we rely on technology in public schools, but we're not helping families be provided with internet at home or to have affordable costs for creating new devices. So I'm going to shift a little bit over, as I always do in Broadband Bites for Lunch. I'm going to talk about some federal and state updates. If you were here last month, you can see that the states that have submitted Volume 2 plans has just risen exponentially. We have so many states that have submitted their Volume 2 plans. They are linked in here for you to take a look at if you want to see, kind of across the board what's happening. Next Century Cities does have a state broadband digital equity plans and proposals page that talks a lot about the different states that are submitting their plans, their digital equity plans, and it's linked to those plans as well. So it's a great resource for you to kind of keep an eye on what your state is doing or how your state kind of fits in with the rest of the nation. Federally, we last month talked about a Democratic senator's letter that was presented, and this month we have 26 governors that signed a letter urging for continued funding in the ACP. And this is a bipartisan letter. It really was championed by Governor Roy Cooper from North Carolina, but there are 26 governors that have signed on to support the ACP. They understand that their constituents need this voucher and need this opportunity to have internet at home, to have devices. And so we really want to see more people signing on to these letters and really urging that the funding for ACP does not run out, because there are over 20 million families, including students, who rely on it every single day. At this point, I wanted to, if there are any people that have questions for me in the chat, please go ahead and add those. I would be happy to answer any questions that you may have. Or any comments that you want to share about what this is bringing up for you, or any personal stories that you might have as it relates to these topics. But in kind of these last couple of minutes, I did want to take an opportunity just for you all to see what NCC has prepared for this next year in 2024. Here are some of our policy priorities. We really want to take a look at equitable funding, digital discrimination, again, making sure the ACP is continuing to be renewed. And so these are really where NCC is focused on in the year 2024. You can see that along with our policy priorities, one of our main priorities for 2024 is storytelling. So really being able to highlight and spotlight what's going on in our member municipalities, in our local governments, who is really doing things that are working well. How can we expand that into other areas? We want to really make sure that we're talking to our members, that we're engaging with our members. We love to hear from you. We love to support you. So if there are things that we can do in 2024, please look out for us, as we kind of want to make sure that we spotlight those stories, that we focus on device access and getting devices into people's hands, because we all know it does. If you have the internet, that's great. If you don't have a device to use the internet on, really, that's the important piece, right? And then again, how do all of these things really affect our workforce development and investing locally in our people, in our schools, in our students, and our children, and our workforce as well? So that's really what we're looking for in 2024. Keep an eye on some events coming down the road. Mark your calendars for April 17th. This is our bipartisan tech event, which is also celebrating our 10-year anniversary of NCC. Join us for our Hallmark in-person event. More details to come, but April 17th, please mark your calendars. We will be taking NCC a little bit on the road this year, as we kind of try to go and meet members where they're at in their local communities, get to know people that we're working with that we've only really seen on Zoom. We're excited for that for sure. And then also, as always, check out for more webinars and more information coming down your way as we talk about panel discussions and this post-BEAD collaboration, state and federal funding, workforce development, device access, and many, many more things. So we look forward to working with you, to hearing from you. We always love to hear from you. So please don't be shy to reach out. And join us next time, which will be in January. We'll talk about the Affordable Connectivity Program. As always, if you were not able to be here with us last month or any previous months, please jump over to our YouTube channel, which has all of our months of Broadband Bites for lunch, with some great guest speakers. If you would like to be a guest spotlight in a future segment of Broadband Bites for lunch, please feel free to reach out to me at stacy@nextcenturycities.org. Again, this is the fourth Tuesday of each month, and we look forward to having everyone. So thank you so much for being here. Again, if you have any questions, any information you want to share, please drop us in the chat, send me an email, or reach out to one of our great team members, because we're always looking to hear from you. I'm going to add my report in the chat just one more time, and look out for an email from me with these slides that have a lot of great links to state BEAD plans, to some of the research that I talked about today, and of course the report. So thank you all for being here, and I look forward to seeing you in January. Take care. Thank you for joining us. I appreciate it.